Okay. I was just about to go in. All right. Hello, everyone. I have Dr. Tanya with me, also known as the Grief Doc. We are going to have an amazing evening this evening because we have such an amazing professional who has decided to offer some of her time and her expertise to be with us tonight to talk about a very important subject that sometimes it doesn't get enough conversation, but it's something that we'll all have to deal with at some point in our lives. I'd love to introduce my friend and my colleague, Dr. 𝐇𝐞𝐚𝐥𝐢𝐧𝐠. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience just by saying hello and whatever else you want to offer?
Yes. First, I want to say thank you, my longtime friend, Daddy. I appreciate this opportunity just to be here and to share this moment with you. And thank you for thinking enough of people to even have this space for us to come.
Excellent.
So I appreciate you for that. My name is Dr. Tanya Cunningham. For those who don't know, I am known as a grief doctor and have been in the industry for a few years, about 35 years. And it has afforded me the opportunity to really accompany hundreds upon thousands of people on their journey. And as a result of doing that, I recognize that most people don't understand what grief is. So we're here tonight to help you navigate that space.
I want to start with where you just said sometimes people don't know what grief is. Mm-hmm. Can you expound on that a little bit more? And I want to know the why behind that.
Yeah, I think the why, or shall I say, what will influence it is cultural. Okay. Our culture will influence that to help us or cause us to not really understand what grief is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's culturally influenced. And what is it? Most people think that grief shows up as sadness a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it shows up as anger.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it shows up while even you're smiling, but on the inside, subconsciously, you're really feeling like, I don't know what. But we've been taught how to bring the face and how to show up. And what we want to do is the first person you have to be honest with is yourself.
Yes.
I work with people all day long. And one of the things I deal with, Dr. Tanya, is people trying to suppress feelings and emotions. And I don't want to cry. And I want to go, I don't want to be sad anymore. And I just think you don't always get to dictate that. And especially if you don't give it a space to breathe, you don't allow the grief to have a space to breathe and to acknowledge it.
Yes, that grief is internal. You're right. So it's something that most people attempt to, here's the C word I call control, how their experience is going to be. But none of us are exempt. You're a part of what I call the grief club. Anybody who's experienced a significant loss, we are a part of a club called the grief club that none of us asked to be a part of. So you're exactly right. And many people are taught to suppress and not to express. So through that suppression, again, they are taught this myth, which is not true, is that you have to be strong. And being strong means no emotion. And that is so far from the truth.
And I also say, like, what do I get for being strong? Why am I being strong? Strong for who?
Exactly.
And I know I'm devastated. And I always think about grief is just is symbolic of love and loss and pain. And I would be remiss to think that somebody, after I'm gone, like you just over here stoic and you don't feel it. I'm going to work next day and I'm perfectly fine. Well, he gone. No, You know, we've
Listen.
been dealing with how we grieve in those rituals for years. And as we progress, you know, our Western culture has made it to where everything is so fast
Yes.
that we need to get over it really, really quickly. And that's not how grief operates. I'm going to take a station break real fast, Dr. Tanya, and I want you to come back with whatever it is you have. But tonight, we want you to be involved. We want you to share your thoughts, share your opinions. Let us know your grief story. Let us know how you make it through the holiday. Let us know those strategies that you use so that you can get through the holidays, and not just the holidays, but life. And so we're excited. We want to hear from you. We want to see you, and we want to see your, your chat. So say hey to us right now. I'm gonna get my phone so I can look and find out where you guys are.
Yeah.
Talk to you.
Hey, G Gibbs.
Okay,
consulting. That's
Okay. Come on now.
My mentee, Rosalind.
Okay.
Phoenix is here, and she's also a therapist. Thanks for joining us.
Wonderful. That's great. That's great. Well, I want us to participate and make sure that hey, G Gibbs. She says she loves the topic. She's my mentee, so I'm thankful that you're here. So I've titled this next section, Dr. Tanya. I call this the expert insights.
Okay.
And you are the expert of the hour.
No, you are.
Let's just say we are grief specialists who work in the area of grief, who really try to bring a little bit of comfort in the most devastating times of someone's life. So I'm always, I'm humbled by the ability to honestly stay focused, to stay present. And people always ask, like, and I'm sure you get it, how do you do this work? I feel like it's a special calling and a special anointing. And it's just something that you want to see people well through this process.
Yes.
I have a question that I want to ask you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on handling grief during the holidays. So in this time of doing this work, what have you learned particularly about the holidays and grief and how it shows up? And then after it shows up, how can we handle the grief during the holidays? Because if we think about it, you know, when Big Mama gone, Big Mama is the person who holds everything together.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we're out of sorts as to what we do next. And I'm going to let you talk on it because I've been gone over the parts I was thinking. Go ahead. I'm going to let you go.
No worries. I'm loving this. I'm loving this, especially when we're talking about grief.
Yes.
So what I have learned about grief, especially concerning the holidays, is that it's challenging for a lot of people because the holiday season is steeped in traditions, right?
Yes.
This is the time when we get together, we go over Big Mama's house, and we go over wherever it is that we gather. And when you have a significant loss, there is an empty chair there. And that empty chair is a constant reminder that, man, my loved one is not here. So it can definitely be challenging for a lot of people during this time because of the holiday seasons, right? Because this season represents joy, happiness, right? I wore this thing for y'all because it makes me feel happy. But when you're in grief, a lot of people are not in that space. And what I've learned through my own grief journey and working with other people, that it is absolutely okay to not be okay.
That is so true. I want to tag on to what you just said, Dr. Tanya. I think like we experience grief at different levels. I'm the 5-year-old kid who experienced grief of my dad. I'm that 50-something-year-old who experienced the grief of my sister. And then I'm that 51-year-old who experienced the grief of my mom. I think in all of those stages, I had grief messed up, honestly.
Yes, I did too.
I thought I had it down pat, and I would be ready for that next person, and even when you're dealing with anticipatory grief, and just
Yeah.
let me break it down, sometimes people don't know.
Right.
Anticipatory grief is when we know that death is likely to happen, and we're even in those final stages, and we're grieving silently. And I think this is a unique space for a lot of people, because there are things outside to deal with our outward grief once they pass, but what's happening with us during the process? So it's so much that I want to get in this short time together.
Yeah.
If you could give someone the best piece of advice to get through the holidays, Dr. Tanya, what would that be?
I would say first and foremost is to acknowledge your grief. That sounds so simple, but the people that I work with, they have difficulty even in giving themselves permission to even grieve. Because the reality that I've learned is that you cannot heal until you allow yourself to feel. You gotta feel. So a lot of times we try to bypass that, especially in the church. That's called spiritual bypass. Honey, we're gonna pray about it and we're gonna move on.
And we're gonna move on.
No, we have to. So that's the best advice in the beginning. Is I would encourage people to really acknowledge that grief and really give yourself permission, even to be happy.
Even to be happy.
Even to be happy, because most people feel guilty that I'm having a good time and my loved one is not here anymore.
Right. And that has to be difficult for someone who, I was just working with someone, and it wasn't a death, but it was maybe the death is like the death of a marriage. And so one of the things that they were talking about is, I want to make sure that this last Christmas is a good Christmas. But I challenged her, and I said to her, but how are you going to be authentic and true to yourself? Because at the end of the day, you are having your own grief, and you have to give yourself time and permission to deal with everything that goes along with it. But again, the conditioning.
Yes.
What we've been taught, I need to appear a certain way. And I'll say this, working as an educator who's worked with kids, oftentimes we wonder, why kids do certain things. Well, they're looking at you.
Bingo.
If you turned off, if you don't have emotions, if you ain't talking about it, what you think the kids gonna do?
Listen.
Go ahead. I want you to go.
I have a great example of that, because I was working with a parent, a single mom, and because of divorce, it was a divorce loss, so experiencing grief. And she had great breakthrough. And she said, I'm getting ready to go tell my children. They were about 21, 22. And she went, and the son said, why do we need that? All we saw was a strong Black woman. We don't need that. And in that moment, she recognized the teaching that taught them. She had conditioned them to not express and deal with their emotions.
Exactly. You hinted on something earlier about the cultural components and what we've been taught. And I do a special presentation. It's called Grieving While Black, because we got some nuances up in our grief. It's showmanship, and then it's also the grief and making sure you show up right, looking a certain way, even in the midst of the grief.
Absolutely.
And I'll be honest with you, I was thinking about my mom's funeral, and one of the things I said to myself, I could hear her now saying, y'all better act right. Y'all better not be out there rolling all down in the floor.
Embarrassing me.
And so those are the chuckles that I get to have, because and another beautiful thing too is it's like with anticipatory grief, really take that time, really take those moments to make peace with death. I oftentimes talk about why death is so hard is because we don't talk about it. And I also say we have to have a healthy relationship with death.
Yes. and start to just you're the expert with the children.
Mhm.
If we
Exactly.
start teaching our children about this, that will
Mhm.
cause them to grow up and be healthy adults
Exactly.
with emotional intelligence that they'll be able
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
easily regulate versus an
Exactly.
adult that don't know how to express their feelings.
Exactly. And going back to the culture piece, I often think about how we show up, how we gather, and we're surrounding the people during the initial phase. But
Mhm.
when everything is over, and let's talk about it,
Yeah.
when the holidays are over, that's when you really are going to experience even more sadness and grief because of potential loneliness.
Yes.
Potential trying to figure out what's next, not knowing
Mhm.
what's next.
Yes.
And then there's the other piece of just understanding, like not having that person around may cause financial issues. It may
Mhm.
be the person who kept the family together.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and I have to admit this is one thing that I have been working in grief forever. And then when my mom died, I did not recognize Dr. Tanya as to her role in the family and how
Mhm.
she kept things moving. And
That's
I
right.
had never thought about her position as unique to all of us because she
Mhm.
kept a lot of the stories and she was like the hub of what's happening in the family. So
That's
when
right.
you take the hub out of the family, you're probably gonna put it's a mess that may come up.
Woo! Yes.
It's some
Yes.
stuff that's gonna come out, some things you didn't know, some
Yeah.
anger, some falling out with people. Um,
Mhm.
but it opens your eyes to realizing sometimes that's a part of the grief, and that's part of suppressing and holding our stories and not telling the truth. And think about it, Dr.
Mhm.
Tanya, when you add on grief upon grief upon grief, what do you have? Suppression, just a stoic, numb type person.
Absolutely. Many people will say, I don't know what to feel. I say, well, the feeling is called numbness. That is a
Mm,
feeling. When and you mentioned, talking about grief upon grief upon grief, and I find
mhm,
that a lot with people I work with.
mhm,
And one of the things that I noticed that if there's unaddressed grief,
mm, mm, mm,
I call it the iceberg theory. So
mhm.
whatever we see above sea level, that's only 10%
Yes,
of us. Like we look good here tonight. But
we looking good.
we looking good.
I love it. Love
Listen,
it.
all festive,
All
but
fest.
no one knows what's going on the inside. That's that 90%
Mhm,
that's under
mhm,
sea level. So
mhm.
when people have a current loss and there's
Yes,
some unaddressed issues, guess what happens? All of that, bloop, it comes to the
comes
surface.
to the surface. Oh,
It
you
comes to
on
the
that.
surface.
You are
Hmm.
so on that.
Hmm.
Someone said, keep in mind that our cultural traditions and holiday celebrations often center heavily around family. Missing loved ones during the moments can feel especially intense when certain dishes, songs, or traditions were closely tied to those we've lost. I've
Hmm.
seen so many people just shut down. I
Hmm.
always convey that we should not shy away, but engage in the honor of the ones we lost. Thank you so much, Twani LaShawn Gray. Thank you for
Yes,
that.
that is
Yeah,
great.
that is so great. But I was thinking about, he was basically talking about how certain things will trigger us.
Yeah.
Um, we're a singing musical family, and at the end of everything, we end with singing.
That's
Well,
good.
I when you start missing people, when people
Hmm.
are not there, we try to go back and recreate that same kind of spirit, that same kind of energy. But what
Right.
we don't recognize is not going to be the same, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
And that is okay.
That's okay. And sometimes we do have to speak to it. There are sometimes we hold things in and we don't talk about it. Even if you
Hmm.
don't verbally speak about it, I'm a big
Hmm.
writer. I love to write. I love to put out posts. I love to put things that tell how I'm feeling.
Right.
Because oftentimes somebody else feels that same way. And I also want them to recognize that a therapist grieves the same way you do.
Yes.
Some days I'm toe up. Some days I'm sitting on here putting on the face, and it's all I can do to get through my sessions. Close the computer or close the door,
yes,
and cry at the end of session. So I just want to normalize that and just let you know that is okay. That is so okay. Those triggers, those certain songs, those holiday things that you're used to experiencing. I want you to share a little bit about that, Dr. Tanya.
Yes, those triggers are a part of our being because it's our brain's response. So a healthy brain will reject death and dying. That's why Elizabeth Kubler-Ross calls it denial and shock. So it takes, a period of time for you to wrap your mind around the fact that, my mother is dead. She's not here. So it's absolutely normal to be triggered because that brain doesn't recognize past tense, present tense, nor future. Your brain only recognizes now. And let me give you a great example. Just like you just shared, sometimes after a session, you will express through crying. Just day before yesterday, I was triggered about my divorce. And it took me by surprise. But what triggered me is I was going through some journals. I'm going through this period of decluttering my home and my life. And I read some entries of some things that took place during the marriage that I had forgotten because I suppressed it. And so the memories came up, but what also came up with the memories, my brain also went and grabbed the pain. Yeah. So I had to decompress. And what brought me out of that space is I addressed it spiritually because we need both natural and spiritually. I worshiped, and that's what brought me out of that space.
Come on, can you just say that again? That just took me when you just said what you do.
I worshipped.
You worship.
I worship.
Now y'all don't know this. Now, Dr. Tanya, she's more than just the grief doc. She has an anointing on her life that'll, I'll say, speak you happy.
And he does too. He does too.
Come on. Well, we about to tear something up in a minute. Statistically, Tori says there are more deaths during the holidays in the USA. That adds to the grief during the holidays. It's not just the absence. It's the anniversary. I'm going to read that again. Statistically, there are more deaths during the holiday in the USA that adds to the grief during the holidays. It's not just the absence, it's the anniversary. And I think that is so true. I've just gone through the first year of my mom being gone, November the 7th. And I thought I had moved past it somewhat, but I found out, I feel like this year was the worst year. I mean, it was worse the second year.
Yes, it is. Often it is.
Okay. And so I feel like I probably was in shock the first year, and you're handling things and you're doing everything you're supposed to do to keep the family together. And then this year is the first year that I just really allowed myself to partake, feel. And one of the things that I really do miss, I really miss the cooking and everything that went along with it. And it's not just about the meal. It's about just that feeling you get. That I think about the condensation on the windows as my mom was cooking. I miss even that.
That's right.
But Tori was talking about how the holidays are such a time to where there are more deaths in the USA. And in that, he also talked about, Jasmine, would you put that up again? Because I want that end part said correctly. He said, and it's not just about the absence, it's about the anniversary. And all of this adds to our grief. Can you expound on that a little bit, Dr. Tanya?
Absolutely, because I know you, as well as other
Mhm.
clinicians out there, have heard of that book called The Body Keeps Score.
Sure. Uh-huh. Mhm. Mhm.
So again, grief is an internal response,
Yes.
emotional, and a
Mhm.
chemical. When we talk about chemical, there are hormones that are released within our
Mhm.
bloodstream, from our brain and all of that, the stress hormones. And
Mhm.
so you don't even have to be thinking about that date coming up. Your body's going to start
Mhm.
responding to that. That's called that somatic response.
Mhm. Mhm. Come on.
And
Come on.
yeah, somatic response. And
Mhm.
I'm actually in that myself right
Yes.
now because I'm
Yes.
approaching the 1 year anniversary of my
Mm.
god sister's death, who
Yes.
died at 50 something years old, just
Mhm.
7 years old, 56,
Mhm.
57.
Mhm.
Went into the hospital. I eulogized her mother on November
Wow.
17th. Seven
Wow.
days later, she's in the hospital and she never came out and
Mm.
died 30 days later,
Mm.
after she buried her grandmother. So my body is around November 17th, I started getting sad and
Mhm.
couldn't figure
Mhm.
out why. And I said, oh, it's that time. Black
Mhm.
Friday, talking
Mhm.
about special days, Black Friday is a trigger for me, for
Yes.
her, because I was buying a new computer. And when
Mhm.
I got the call that she was being placed on the ventilator, so I
Mm.
rushed out of Best. So it took me, I didn't go back to Best Buy to set up my computer
Mhm.
until July of this year.
Mm.
July
Mm.
of this year.
Mm. That's
But
amazing how you just said that it took you a while to set
it
up
took
your
me a while.
computer because you didn't want to go to that space.
I suffered with a dinosaur computer because I did.
I'm
That's
telling
what
you, I
grief
get it.
did. I
Mhm.
suffered with that computer until I just couldn't do it. Just died. It was so slow. And
Mhm.
then I
Mhm.
went July 4th to Best Buy. So Tori, you're
Mm.
exactly right.
Yes,
But I also
exactly.
want to add,
Mhm.
Danny, that uh, also during this time, some people are experiencing what is called seasonal affective disorder.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's called the SAD, where they have
Mhm.
their hormones are off and they have more melatonin that makes them
Right.
sleepy and things like that, and they fall
Right.
into seasonal depression.
Right. I wanna extend that a little bit, but I wanna talk about traumatic death. We
Mm,
talked about anticipatory, but we haven't talked about like around the holidays having those traumatic deaths to where we're not prepared to
yeah,
any degree. An
yeah,
automobile accident, a
yeah.
drowning, so many variances of that, a suicide. Uh,
Hmm.
let's talk a little bit about
Hmm.
those traumatic deaths and how it affects a lot of people at this time.
Because it's important to know that all grief is not traumatic.
Mhm, mhm.
Some is. I think you gave an example earlier about the difference between grieving a child and maybe
Mhm.
your older grandmother.
Exactly.
But when there's been an accident or trauma associated with that, so you have the trauma and the grief that
Exactly.
you have to navigate through. And when
Mhm,
you're dealing with, again, there is a type of grief called traumatic grief.
mhm,
What also falls underneath that category is also, some call it complex grief.
mhm.
Other clinicians may call it complicated grief.
Complicated.
So
Mhm,
if you're in that space where you've had someone to die by suicide, homicide,
mhm,
unexpected, a kid, your
mhm,
grief experience is going to be more intense and
mhm.
elongated. And
Mm,
if the legal system is involved,
mhm.
you will have to generally wait till that comes to a resolve one way or the other before your grief can move forward.
I think one of the things that you said, Dr. Tanya, just kind of talking about the different types of grief, the complex and the complicated grief. I was thinking about imagining having someone die, and they've died by suicide or they've died by something we can't talk about.
Right.
I often think that's a layer. Those are those different layers where it.
Yeah, Danny froze. So he's talking about those different layers there. And that is very, very true, because you have these different issues that's complicating that grief process. So for the one that may be experiencing grief because of, something complex, such as a death loss with that involves homicide or suicide, you want to be able to deal with each layer. And that's one of the things about grief. I get asked a lot. People will ask, how long is this going to last? How long am I going to grieve? And another grief expert, his name is David Kessler. I saw a video that he posted the other day where people ask him that, how long am I going to be in this grief process? And he said, if it's a death loss, he said, how long is the person going to be dead? They're going to be dead forever. Now, however, as you work through and allow yourself to do what I call participate in your healing, you will start grieving more with love versus pain. Love versus pain. So this is how you can basically gauge how you are progressing in your grief journey. If you are remembering your loved one with more love and less pain. More love and less pain. So Danny mentioned about anticipatory grief, but there's also what we talk about acute grief. That is when your loved one dies. Acute care. We get that in the hospital, right? So acute grief is exactly when your loved one dies. And then you move to what is called early grief. That's the first 2 years of the loss. You're in what is called early grief. And then you move to what is called mature grief. That's from year 3 up until today. So grief in and of itself, it never ends, but the pain of it does. The pain of it does. So when Danny was sharing about those layers of grief, you could be experiencing multiple losses at the same time. You may be in acute grief with one, then you find yourself in early grief with another, and then you find yourself in mature grief with other losses. So the key point is to find out where you are in your grief journey. Okay? Find out where you are. Acute grief, early grief, mature. So Rosalind says, it is truly necessary to give yourself grace during your grief journey. No need to rush the process. Thank you for sharing that. There is no need, because even if you try to rush the process, it won't work, because grief works on its own timetable. Meaning, again, you have to allow yourself to experience that. Mike says, this is the first time in 60 years that I don't have a dog in my house. You get me, Mike? I'm a dog lover. I don't have a dog in my house for the holidays. My dog understood me when my family couldn't or wouldn't. Listen, I am living in my home that I grew up in, and my parents, we had dogs, but my parents believed that dogs belonged outside. So they're gone now. They died. And I went through a devastating divorce, and my sister gifted me a dog. Mike, I get it now. I used to be a person that didn't understand it. I was like your family. I get it now. So our fur babies are definitely a part of our families. And you do experience grief. Now, with that, you experience the type of grief that's called disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief. And what type of grief is that? That is the grief that is not accepted by the general public. So, Mike, people probably, and even maybe some of your family members may be looking at you crazy, like, it was just a dog. I just get over it. And that's the type of grief that you're experiencing, disenfranchised grief. So I am so sorry to hear about that. So sorry. Yes. Welcome back. He's back.
Welcome back. What's so funny? I said, I have a pro on here who is going to handle business. I was not worried. And I said, you know what? I have to calm down. I got to decompress.
There you go.
all I can do is reboot. And so I
That's it.
rebooted, and here we're back.
Absolutely.
But I want you to talk to me a little bit about what you guys were just talking about. I want to make sure I'm in that same space.
Okay. So I was sharing with them about, you said those layers. And then I moved into talking about grief being something that never ends. But the pain of it should. The pain of it should, because grief is on the inside. And Queen Elizabeth, I love how she phrased it. She said, grief is the price that you pay for love. So if you endeavor to love someone, grief is going to happen when that relationship ends, whether it ends by death, by divorce, by estrangement. It opens the door to grief. So I talked about being in anticipatory grief, like you said, then move into acute grief, and then you move to early grief, and then you're in mature grief. And just finding out where they are and really asking themselves, have I really processed all of the losses that I've had?
I want to look at a few of those comments just to see if there's some questions out there or things that you'd like to have answered. If Jasmine will just flash those up, if you see any that you notice. Let's see if do you see one, Dr. Tanya?
LaShawn.
LaShawn. Okay.
Yeah, she says, of course, good evening. Thank you for having this conversation on sometimes a challenging topic. And you're exactly right, Sean. It is. And so we're here because we want to normalize it.
And that's the thing I tell people all the time. If we keep having the conversation, it won't be so awkward. It won't be so, sometimes we panic because it's something we don't visit until it happens. Rosalind says we have to be willing to slowly embrace the new normal. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that, Rosalind, because there is a new normal. But I also think, as a therapist in my mind, what is normal? Who decides what normal is? And I just think sometimes it's about, it's probably going to be typical. Typical, I'm going to feel this from time to time. But embracing the new normal, and that's how some people say it. But
I like that. Typical.
Typical. Typical.
I'm gonna give you credit when I use that. Typical.
Use it. And I had a good friend, Dolores. She said something powerful that I will take with me. She said, "Having emotions and feelings ain't ever killed anybody."
Right.
And oftentimes what we want to do is estrange ourselves from the pain because we don't want to feel it or be a part of it. And I'm just like, you just lost someone you love or you care about, and you're expecting yourself to be over it in 2 weeks. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think, and I also don't think it's healthy. You shouldn't want to be over your grief in 2 weeks. Now, we do understand that life is going on, things are happening. But I'm a big believer in, like, we can go to the bathroom, we can go to our car, we can do whatever we need to do to just have that minute where grief visits us and we can acknowledge it and move forward. Dr. Tanya, I think you saw where I put a post up talking about pound cake grief.
Grief. I shared it.
And I had a moment. Where I could have broke down in that store just on the floor, but I had my moment. I left. So I'll tell the story. I was in the 7-Eleven, something like that, and I saw this pound cake. And it's the pound cake that my mama used to love, and I would bring it to her each and every time. So I look at that pound cake, and I'm over here just boo-hooing.
Pound cake, exactly.
Over pound cake. We think a trigger is always a picture. We think a trigger is going to that destination or that place. It can be simple as being thrown off and seeing some pound cake.
That's right. Smells with sense. For me, for my daddy, hearing a lawnmower. because he stayed outside all the time. So when I hear lawnmowers, it triggers that grief for my dad.
Oh, that's good. I love to hear everybody's different grief triggers, and sometimes there's a sweetness to it because it's your own personal little thing that reminds you of them. Like I said, the condensation on my mama's windows in the trailer when she was cooking sweet potato pies and things like that. Those were moments I really cherish, and I'm so appreciative of it. Let's see what Tori says. What do you call grief over the loss of an inanimate object like a house, toy, blanket, or heirloom?
Disenfranchised grief.
Disenfranchised. I was thinking that was the one that we call it, disenfranchised. Oftentimes we have these visions and these dreams, and we weren't set up to lose our house or to lose our toy or to lose our blanket.
That's right.
And it really can be devastating. And just like you said about the disenfranchisement, that can be difficult on someone. I was also thinking about stars, people who die. Stars, people who die, and we feel this connection to them, and we don't understand why we're crying, why we're grieving, why we're this and that. And I watch the news every day, and they're like family.
They
you
are.
See those people every day. There's a connection each and every day. And if you're in a relationship with people, you're going to grieve, you're going to feel, and you're going to connect. So, Dr. Tanya, do you mind sharing a little bit about the connections and how that manifests itself?
Yeah, it's because it's connected to the loved one. It belonged to them. This is why some people have difficulty in removing their belongings, their clothes, and all of that, because that was mama's, that was big mama's. I was a guest on a podcast several years ago, way before the pandemic, of a person, she's in real estate. And she said she didn't realize, but she had a lot of clients who were in grief and having a tough time when it was time to sell the house. This big mama's house, all of that.
Exactly. You know something, you said something too, and sometimes we are unwilling to let go, and it causes us more pain and more struggle.
Yes, it does. Not being willing. I encourage people, when you're going through the belongings of your loved one, you want to put things in 3 piles. What you're going to keep, and you cannot keep everything. But what you're going to keep, what you're going to donate, a giveaway, and then lastly, what we're going to throw in the trash. That's the hard part. I don't want to throw it in the trash. My sisters, I remember, they didn't participate in anything with mother's death. I had to do it all, as far as cleaning out her things. And I said, if I'm here and when daddy goes, that's on y'all. Y'all got to do it. They say, okay, we'll do it. Listen, I left them in charge. I had to go. That's when I was working at the funeral home. I had to go out of town to work a funeral home, left them in charge to clear out mother's things. When I got back, they didn't do it. Matter of fact, they went to an estate sale and brought other people's dead stuff back in the house.
How are we going to do that?
They did. They want to keep mother's old bent up tin pan. Well, this was mother's. I said, but we can't use that. It doesn't have. Yes,
we can't
so it's
use
hard
those.
to release that.
Question. Family separated after my mother's death, but we all came together while she was hospitalized. Some became silent. Do I reach out or leave them be? That's a multi-layered question. I'll be honest with you. I'll start on it and you can finish it up.
Okay.
I think you have to be sensitive to the situation and recognizing where you are. I oftentimes tell people, I say, everybody deals with grief differently. And just because I'm a step ahead or a step behind, that doesn't mean I'm better in it. But I also recognize that we're in those different spaces. And as we talked about earlier, sometimes it's these unsaid conversations that needed to happen, and they're not even about us who are living.
That's right.
It's about them and some things that may have not been resolved, but the death is just the head. It reaches a head to where everything is explosive.
Yeah.
And I do think we have to give people time. I think we have to give them space. And I think you can't do, and there's nothing wrong with checking on someone and just seeing how are you doing and how are you feeling, things of that nature. Do you want to add on to that, Dr. Tanya?
Yes. Yeah, I agree with all of that you shared. And I would add that because I am a proponent of, I believe in family. Yes, and family looks different.
Exactly.
It's not that, listen to this, typical.
Typical.
Typical. It's not the typical family that most people would think, but family is important, whatever that looks like for you. But do know your experience is not uncommon. Sadly, it is typical for families to not come together. They break up after a significant death. But just like Danny had mentioned, just with all the expectations, know that going in, you will be basically going in if you're going to talk to them in an effort to express where you are, but allowing other people to be where they are too. Because we have to deal with people where they are, not where we think that they should be.
That's so good, because I find in counseling, conversations are simply that. I get to say how I feel, but I don't get to dictate the response.
That part.
I'm hopeful that it works out well, but I oftentimes tell clients, I say, set yourself up for both outcomes. It can be fruitful, and sometimes it may need a little bit more time, but getting that out sometimes and not being a part of the equation, like they may be thinking you're not speaking to them versus the other way around. So
versus the other way around, and what that does, Danny, to the lady who said, the family's not speaking anymore, that opens up another layer of grief. Because you're getting ready to grieve and mourn a living loss, because they're alive, but you don't have connection with them. So I encourage. I have found something in my practice that has been very, very heartwarming to me, because I am for the family. Is that when people come, they want to do. They say, "I want to bring my family," and I say, "Well, let's work on you first." The best gift you can give your children, a parent, the best gift you can give your children, the best gift you can give your family is the healed version of you. Healing has a look, and it will spread. You just start healing. And those that, listen, hear the preacher, have an ear to hear and see, they're going to come along. And I've had that. I've got about 3 to 4 families I'm working with now, and it all started with one person. And they start calling. Well, I say, how'd you hear about me? Well, you see my so-and-so and so, and I see they're different and they're healing, and I want that too.
That is so good. They're attracted to the healing, and they want that healing for themselves. I think that is so powerful, and I think that's something that is such a blessing, that people see you as a healing agent and can come to you. I do grief. I find a lot of times it just depends on your stage and area of grief. And I had a client, I remember, like, she was just, I'm asking myself, I'm like, well, why are you here? She was everything I put out, everything. I don't want to hear that. And I'm like, okay. It just sounds like you're not at a place to where you're ready to do anything with that. And that is perfectly okay. Grief is a personal journey. I oftentimes say, and when I do supervision or I'm working with another therapist, be intentional about listening to your client. They give you cues and evidence as to what needs to happen. I'll say this to parents, people out there. Listen to each other. People will give you cues as to what they want or what they need. Sometimes we're just not listening intently enough to the needs, to those things that those people need from us.
Yes.
You were about to say, Dr. Tanya.
That just ditto to what you just talked about as far as listening. I was just going to say actively listening.
Actively listening.
Actively listening.
That's so good. I want to do a little quick commercial break right now.
Yeah.
I want to tell you about some things that are coming up for us. Dr. Tanya, do you want to share? You got a massive list of things, but would you share a few of those upcoming things that you have coming up that people can connect to or just know where to go?
Yeah, well, I have the new release of my boy version of my children's book in grief. I released Chelsea Cares earlier in April of this year, and I had so many parents and guardians that came and said, "Do you have the boy version?" And I didn't think about that. I'm like, well, can't they just read that? They say, no, my child won't read that. He needs his own.
Exactly.
And so we got the boy version. It's called 𝐇𝐞𝐚𝐥𝐢𝐧𝑠 Cares.
𝐇𝐞𝐚 Cares. I love that.
Cares.
I love that.
And it's about a bereavement bear that goes around and helping children. So that's available, and it has its companion coloring book.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So let me ask you, how do we get in touch with you if somebody wants your services or support? How do they get in touch with you?
You can go to my website is drtanyacunningham.com.
And I offer that easy. Just
that easy. I offer a 15-minute, and I do mean 15-minute complimentary discovery call, and we see if it's a good connect. If not, hey, I'm gonna refer you out to somebody that can help you, because I'm like you. I just want people to get help.
That's exactly right. So I'm gonna have to do like you. I give them 30 minutes, and so I need to cut that back.
That's too long. That's a session. That's too long, brother.
That's too much. Okay. Okay, we got to cut this on down. We're about to cut this on down. But I do want to let you know that we have some things. Go to our websites. Mine is themessages.net. I have a grief resource on there where you can get my book. It's called Buried Messages. It takes you on the journey of the death of, my dad and my mom, my sister's death. And it's such a phenomenal book in the sense of, to me, getting through those early stages as to how a person really thinks and how a person really feels. And what I find unique about it is, being a therapist, I kind of integrated the two as to like, this is what I probably would say to someone as a therapist, but this is how I'm feeling. Yeah. And so we marry the two, and it's called Buried Messages. And it's so many messages that weren't said, weren't shared, weren't talked about. And where do they go? Sometimes they go in the ground with them. But we do have an opportunity to talk and to give those messages life through counseling, through good friends. And I'm just going to encourage you guys, if you need counseling, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you getting the support and the help you need. Sometimes it's not your good girlfriend. Sometimes it ain't your boy. They don't have the skill set to talk about those higher things that need to be talked about and processing effectively. And that's what I was saying. Like, sometimes we really have to listen intently to be led by our client to know what it is that we need to ask or talk about. I want to go to, I still didn't tell y'all about it. This weekend, I have a group. It's called Grief Support, and it's from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. It's hosted virtually, and I just want you to understand, and it's only $27. It's for people who want to share. I'm not going to be telling you how to feel. I'm not going to be processing. It's not going to be therapeutic in nature, but we're going to talk and support each other. And I actually think sometimes those are the things that we need as well. Coming in January, we have the grief support training. If you're in ministry, if you're a lay person who's helping with grief, we have something to teach you the basics of grief. I'm not going to give you any real deep stuff. It's just some things to help you understand the processes and how you enter into that grief space to support the person that you're working with. I really want this to be something that our church leadership and those who are lay members, they attend, because we really need to have a healthier relationship with death and grief.
Yes.
Dr. Tanya, I want to go to this next little spot where we talk about those unexpected changes, those curveballs, those things that kind of surprise us. Would you share a little bit about that?
Yes. So when you talk about changes, period, change is something that a lot of people will say, I want change, but it can be difficult to do the necessary things we need to do to experience that change, because it can be challenging in and of itself. But then you have an unexpected change, such as a death, and it really changes the dynamics of your life. So life will definitely throw you curveballs, and you don't really recognize that, oh my God, this just happened. I wasn't expecting it. It was a surprise. And it was like, you got a present or a surprise test that you wasn't ready to deal with. That's exactly. So some of you are in that space where the death happened suddenly, unexpectedly, and you didn't know. So you're having to deal with all of these unexpected changes. And guess what? They continue to happen. It's what I call the ripple effect. So you have the person, if it's a death loss, it's a primary loss with that person. But then looking at the roles of the things that they did. So there's unexpected changes there. Some people become an instant caregiver because the caregiver died. And now you got to become an instant caregiver. An unexpected change, and learning how to navigate those spaces and to make sure you don't lose yourself as you navigate these unexpected changes.
Okay, that's good. That's so good. I also think about, I want to tag on to what you just said. A lot of times grief will catch us off guard, and what it does, it kind of makes us unsure of the next day. And the next day can be symbolic of our lives together, what I can expect. And I was telling somebody, it makes you feel like you can't trust what's next, because you are going about your day, living the way you were living, looking for tomorrow, looking for that that celebration or that holiday, and grief comes in and throws everything off. If I can't trust this to be in place, how am I going to trust anything else?
That's so
I want you to talk on this, and I think I heard you talk on it on another show. It's about like, what do you do when you've prayed and you have prayed and you have prayed and you have taken it to the altar and they don't survive? I think people need to hear this.
Yeah, that is a tough one that a lot of people of faith are experiencing. Because I can remember going to a death call as a minister of the church I belonged to, and the daughter was having a tough time because she said, I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. I can't tell you why millions of people died of COVID, and then millions of people lived. I can't tell you that. But when it comes to faith, we understand that there are some answers we will never get the answer to, or some questions we won't get the answer to. Why? Because he is sovereign. However, you can express your emotions and your grief, and that really helps people through that process more than they realize. A lot of people, I was working with a person today, and she said, I think I'm angry. And guess what? We discovered that she's dealing with spiritual PTSD.
Oh,
that's a layer. Yeah. And it took her by surprise, like, oh my God. Okay. And so really allowing yourself, she said, I think I'm angry. I said, well, be angry.
That's right.
That is a valid, your emotions are valid, whatever they are. Yeah.
You said something earlier I want to talk on, or we've talked about it before, but I often think about our churches, our places of worship. Oftentimes we leave places we have to leave for different reasons, whatever those reasons are.
Right.
There's a grieving period, even in that.
Yes.
Disconnecting
Absolutely.
from your place of worship, connection, belonging. And then there's the other part, once you leave and don't nobody call you or even notice that you've been gone.
That part, all of that. Yes, I can personally relate, again, going through the divorce from a guy who was also my pastor. And I had never been without a church home. So that was a huge loss for me.
Right.
Huge loss, relationships and connections. But just to speak to what you just said, there was this 80-year-old lady who I didn't even know she knew how to text. That lady would text me every Sunday for a solid year. Hey, because Sundays were hard for me. Being a former pastor's wife. And she said, hey, it's Sunday and I'm checking in on you.
I love it.
Thank you for checking in on me. And that really helped me navigate that space well.
I really want to do something in that space of just kind of talking about church grief and the navigation of all the dynamics that go along with it. I think churches and places of worship are so unique. And sometimes we have our leadership who's grieving. And again, as our parents, if we're not displaying our hurt to the congregation, we put up these facades that everything is okay.
That's right. And that bothers me when that happens, because that's teaching your members or your parishioners that, oh, okay, well, I guess he's not hurting. And then I don't have enough faith. So yes, we must get into the church. As a matter of fact, you talked about what was coming up. I'm a part of a ministry event coming up on the 18th of next month with 𝐍𝐚𝐯𝐢𝐳𝐠 𝐇𝐈𝐕𝐄. Yes, and connected with him, and he's going to deal with, the calling and stuff like that from a prophetic standpoint. I'm going to be dealing with trauma and grief associated with ministry.
Oh,
yeah, because it's a lot of grief.
When is that? I want to know.
It's on the 18th of January. You can look on my page.
Okay. Let's look on her page and find out where she is. This is a plethora of information. I really want to give it up to Dr. Tanya Cunningham. I am just elated that you agreed to come and talk to our audience today. You gave us so much insight and knowledge and support related to grief. This is not the last one. We got so many different parts of grief that we can talk about.
Yeah.
And I know we have this connection to where we can feed off of each other and we can help some people. Yeah. So don't go through this holiday by yourself.
Right.
Do what you need to do to take care of yourself, to know that you're loved. Speak good to yourself. Speak healthy and kind things to yourself, and give yourself grace. I want to thank you guys for being with us today and sharing all of your comments, taking time out of your night. Thank you so much, and have a blessed and wonderful holiday season. We will see you